Hello and welcome to Seminary Reacts, where we ask professors to react to Reddit questions and stories. Today I am joined by AMBS alumni Sarah Nahar. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so good to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, could you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you have a lot of knowledge and passion for?
So I am Sarah Nahar, and I'm born and raised in the Great Lakes watershed. And so I'm really grateful for the fertile land and clean water around which I grew up. And so I'm always trying to connect back with this Great Lake watershed where AMBS is. And part of what I do in the world is work on clean water. And clean water is only clean until there's poop in the water. So really having to deal with our crap, literally and metaphorically, is what I work on now. My PhDs were in religion and environmental studies, and they came together at this question of the toilet, which I think we'll be getting into that.
Yes, we
because
will.
we're in some deep shit. Can I say that on the podcast?
We'll have to bleep you, but yes.
Oh, okay, good to know. Although, it's a word with noble roots. Comes from like the Latin shindira and the Greek schism. Sooner or later, it just means to separate, like what separates from our body. But it's become a bad word, and I'm sad about it. I think plastic should actually be a bad word, but maybe that's for another Reddit thread.
But before we dive in, what experience do you have with Reddit?
Well, not too much, but every once in a while, in a search, it'll come up, and I see how, to some extent, it's been a really helpful community for folks finding out things and crowdsourcing knowledge. And to another extent, it seemed like kind of a dumpster fire, like a really difficult place to be. So like much of the internet, no technology is neutral. And so, how we react and respond to it does have an impact. So I'm excited to see where this goes because I don't know too much about it.
Yeah. Well, we are starting off with a very strong story, and then we'll get into some questions and stories and reflections that I think have a lot of depth to them, but we're definitely starting off on an interesting one. Are you ready for our first story?
Okay, let's go.
All right. So this first one is coming from the subreddit Am I the Devil? And as a new Reddit experiencer here, I will say that Am I the Devil is where different stories from other subreddits are reposted, often because they are the worst of the stories. So we're looking at a big one here. So this post says, am I in the wrong for confronting a waiter for not doing more to make me, a Christian, feel better about going out to eat on a major holiday? So the story here goes, I will preface this by saying I am not a confrontational person by nature, and I try to be as welcoming and understanding of others, so I would like to ask that same in return. I am a Christian because it is my truth. I expect that not everyone is Christian, as that is the nature of free will, but just as you hold your beliefs close to your heart, this happens to be mine. You do not need to agree with my religious beliefs, but this is important in understanding where I am coming from. I just had what was otherwise a perfect, lovely Christmas Eve brunch with my husband and my daughter, but it has since been spoiled by an argument spurned by a waiter's remarks and behavior. When we arrived at the restaurant, I made it clear to the hostess that we were celebrating Christmas Eve. The hostess was very nice and even relayed her Christmas plans with us. The restaurant was understandably busy, but she was very conversational and well-mannered and helped make us feel at ease. This gave me what I now know was a false impression that everyone working there would be just as kind and welcoming. When we were finally shown to our seats, our waiter introduced himself, and I, in turn, reiterated that we were celebrating Christmas Eve, and that was the primary reason for the brunch. Instead of any reaction at all from the waiter, he says, "Okay," with a smile, and begins to list the specials they are serving. This was the first red flag, and a complete 180 to the hostess, who is at least acknowledging the specialness of today and that it is not like any other day. One of the specials he even listed had Christmas in the name, which was ironic. Our meals were lovely, and I was willing to overlook the lack of warmth the waiter had to the announcement of our celebration on what is, to me, a holy day. As we asked to pay the bill at the table, my husband was operating the credit card machine, and I decided to strike up a conversation with the waiter. I elaborated on our Christmas Eve plans and our family tradition of staying up until midnight and opening one gift as the clock strikes 12. He smiled and chuckled, but no elaboration on his part. Even if he didn't celebrate, he seemed totally incapable of acknowledging how important this day was to millions of people. I gave a shocked look with my eyes to my daughter as a silent form of communication of, whoa, what is this guy's issue? My husband gave back the credit card machine, and as the waiter handed us our receipt, he said, "Happy holidays." I was so peeved by this that I piped up and said again, "We were celebrating Christmas," in case he forgot, not just any holiday. And then we left in a huff. My daughter thinks I am overreacting, but my husband agrees wholeheartedly that the waiter was rude. I can understand if you don't know someone's religion to say happy holidays, but if he knows we are Christian, why treat us this way? Am I really in the wrong here?
So now I just react to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
That's a bit to take in.
Yeah, let me just take a deep breath, because the context of this story, I think, is the United States, which is a place where there is deep Christian hegemony. And what I mean by hegemony is that not only is Christianity the dominant religion numerically, also our work calendars and our days of the week are scheduled around Christianity. And this applies to people whether or not they are believers. So immediately between Christians and people of other faiths or humanness or no faith at all, there is a power imbalance. And so whenever there's a power imbalance and you find yourself on the side of having more power or privilege or ease within a structure, the invitation, I think, from Jesus and also from a sense of wanting to make space for everyone on this planet is to come with compassion. Mm-hmm. I hear in this person, so if I offer compassion to the person who's written this story, I hear her desire to connect, but the connection seems to be within the realm of recognizing Christmas in a particular way. I hear that she was celebrating Christmas and it had to do with a present and midnight, but there's no mention, for example, of Christ, if that's the issue. And if there is for her something about Christ in there, then I would invite her even to come off of the question of presence and just think about that vigil. That Christmas Eve vigil is often trying to replicate or just hold on to this holy space or this night that was different or this liminal space. If she had a daughter, so the daughter may be adopted, but if not, she may have given birth. And so she knows what it was like to labor and to be in those liminal spaces potentially. And that is where that holy night comes from. Not so much just like waiting till the clock strikes to grab a present. Like it seems like consumerism is really kind of creeping its way in here.
Right.
And there's no judgment that they were out at a restaurant as opposed to having a meal with someone else, or opposed to if they hold Christmas Eve so strongly to be serving meals to people who don't have folks to eat with or enough to eat, but who want to have a special Christmas meal. There are places for her to be, and not only that, just to extend compassion to the waiter who is working on what ends up being a major holiday.
Right.
And the labor laws in this country and things, we have to credit people of other faith, specifically shout out to Jewish labor organizers who help, bring together many in unions to bring us the weekend, and to have these sense of rest. And that was Jewish, Christian, Muslim, collaboration. But here we still have capitalism still being like, no, we can keep our shops open all the time.
Right.
And so what I would love to see from that person is a recognition like, hey, you're working on Christmas Eve. Do you have what you need?
Right.
Maybe even leave an extra big tip, you know? So that the compassion can come through. And if it's about Christianity, which she did say that, you know, that's her faith, that waiter would see that and know that we are Christians by our love and by our connection. And the other thing too is that for many people, regardless of faith tradition, the holidays aren't always a happy time. Many more churches and others are having celebrations, actually rituals, let's say, for grief. They call them Blue Christmas or Longest Night, recognizing that December 21 in the Northern Hemisphere is the longest night, and that the holidays can bring up so much. Perhaps as a child, this waiter has trauma associated with Christmas. And so by saying happy holidays, that's all that they could eke out at that time. But for whatever reason, couldn't say the word. Perhaps tragedy struck in their household on Christmas. We just don't know. And perhaps that's why they were working that time. So there's so much unknown in our interactions with one another that I would love to see us bring more spaciousness at this time. And just because she's celebrating Christmas doesn't mean that's the only holiday she celebrates. So for my example, myself, I definitely commemorate Advent. Then there's also Christmas. Then there's Kwanzaa, which is really important to those of us in the African diaspora to celebrate Umoja, Kujichakuila, Ujima, Ujamaa, Nia, Kuumba, and Imani. That's unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, faith, right? And so that spans from Christmas all the way to New Year's. Then, of course, there's New Year's, and I do participate with other faith communities in their prayers and their celebrations. So at this time, we also have Diwali, this festival of lights. You know, we have Hanukkah, right? Again, thinking about miraculous light in dark times. And that makes a lot of sense. You know, solstice as well, and traditions from Scandinavia. It's just so important to connect with everything. You know, we sing Yuletide. That's a marker. And just really recognizing that when holy light is able to guide us in times of difficulty, and remember that the Christmas story happened under immense duress, Roman taxation and oppression. The Holy Family fled. You know, we had many children were killed at that time. Okay, that's a lot to load on a brunch. I get it. But if someone says happy holidays, let's meet them in their humanity.
Right.
You know? And for me, it's not only the holidays, D-A-Y-S, but it could be D-A-Z-E, which is like you're in a daze sometimes because the schedule is all off and everything. So we never know what that waiter was going through. And I hear that person wants to be met in their specific language. But I would invite them to extend grace and to extend that peace that we celebrate in the birth of the miraculous birth, you know. And so I hope that if this person ever hears back, you know, I see you in your Christmas celebration and in your vigiling and staying up, and you know, may your intensity and passion for your faith take you to go alongside the most marginalized. That would be my response if I was on the computer, but.
Well, I think like you've mentioned a lot of really, really good things here. And I think like in this story, it really does seem like this writer is just not totally getting the point of Christmas, and like kind of like you'd mentioned of any holidays. Like it really does seem like they've just overlooked the purpose of Christmas, and for Christians who are celebrating, I mean, this is a holy day, and what exactly that means, and just the reality that the most important people in the Christmas story are in marginalized situations. And yeah, it's really sad to see. And I think reading this story, looking at the comments of this and hearing reflections on this, there's a lot of anger towards this person and the entitlement they seem to be exuding in this meal, where they're talking all about their Christmas traditions to this waiter and trying to, I guess, bait them into talking about their experience too. But I think that, like you mentioning, like, we don't know what this waiter is going through. We really don't know. And the reality, like, this waiter's working on Christmas. Like, they kind of, in a way, should already know what their tradition is right now because they're working. But yeah, I mean, it is just kind of sad to see this scenario where a Christian just is very caught up in their own celebration and is kind of forgetting, like, this is not about them. So, I mean, and I know that, like it's kind of a trend that there are people who talk about how they hate the phrase happy holidays, but I think, like, I really don't know how to kind of get through their heads, like, how do you, I mean, like, how do you get them to kind of put that down and just say, like, okay, it's not about me, it is about like the importance for them of Christmas being a holy holiday, but it's so much deeper than just the capitalistic parts we see of Christmas. Yeah, it is really hard to figure out, like, how do you have a productive conversation with a person who believes like this and have them really get, like, oh, you're right, like, this is the point of Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think ongoing conversation, but yeah, like, really just trying to go with them on, like, what would Jesus do? Where would Jesus be? With whom would he be dining?
Yeah.
And how might we emulate that?
Right. Yeah. All right, are you ready for our first question?
Okay.
So this post is coming from the subreddit Christianity, and the question is, why aren't more Christians conservationists? So recently, I've been thinking about how Earth was created as a gift to humanity by God, right? If this is the case, why aren't more Christians in support of protecting God's creation? God created this entire world with all the animals and plants and insects and trees and plants, all of it for humanity, and with humanity as the best steward. If this is the case, then humans should be doing everything in their power to protect God's gift to them. As we watch thousands of species go extinct, these are supposed to be the creatures that we're here to protect. And if for some reason you believe that God only meant for us to be protected by us, not protecting the plants and animals and insects means that we eventually get harmed. It is our responsibility as God's children to protect the gifts that he has given us, and one of the most important above all is the protection of the planet we live on. I hope this post can connect with some people somewhere and that they can speak with their pastors about this issue. I believe that if we can ignite a conversation and understanding within the people of Christianity that the earth is a sacred gift of God, that we can begin working even harder to protect this sacred gift. This is not something we can just let slide. The protection of God's sacred gift of earth is important for our children, our children's children, and the generations that come on and on until the end of time. For all these things to be available to your future ancestors, we must begin acting now to protect this sacred gift by God the Creator, or we can be tricked by the devil into treating this gift as though it is ours to selfishly plunder and poison. So again, the main question that this person asking here is, why aren't more Christians conservationists?
It's a great question. You know, shout out to Pope Francis and the encyclical, which means like a very long and deliberative document about the environment. It's called Laudato Si, right? Praise be, like in praise of this incredible creation and the intricacies on every level of this cosmos. And so the invitation is to recognize, indeed, we are invited to be a part of this living, breathing planet called good. And it is indeed awesome to watch people when they leave their church pews and are out, maybe even having like a wild church service, which is like a service that occurs outside, and your senses are heightened, and the sense of communion that you have in the bread and the cup also is reflected in the communion with all of the more than human and the oneness of everything. And so I too wonder why more aren't. But a lot of systems of domination and separation scarcity and control have entered into how Christianity is understood. And if we look back at the early church and how they were and what they were doing, they were moving around by walking. They were tending to one another's like physical gardens and the gardens of their spirit. They were making food for one another. They were experiencing the animals and the plants in a very real and connected way, almost as if we're like sibling creatures rather than being this kind of creature that is above others. So there are two ways that one could go about it, I think, is to think about it like this person is here, is that like humans have a special role and like in a hierarchy, and that things are created for us and therefore we should care. And if that is what resonates most and brings people to be stewards, then like that is really one way to go about it. Understand that beings and things and others under your care rely on you to defend them and to protect them. Alternatively, as many other indigenous teachings tell us, humans evolutionarily were one of the last groups to appear. And so we are actually the youngest sibling of creation. And so in many ways, we are to look up to the other species, to learn from the spider in terms of web weaving, to learn from the beaver in terms of how to slow water down and nurture landscapes. To learn, and Jesus picks up on this too, from the birds of the air and the animals that do not toil and store up, but move in migratory patterns in order to find what they need. So there are a lot that we can also learn and see ourselves not so much as the leading species, but a following species, and to see that also in a way of being faithful, that is faithful as well, to study and understand each and every watershed that we're a part of. So I mentioned from the Great Lakes watershed, right? So there are particular features within this bioregion that help me to be a more faithful person. So just as I might do a daily devotional in my biblical text, am I doing a daily devotional by visiting the river, checking out the water quality? Just as I might go to church each week, am I also going to advocate at City Hall to protect clean air and to protect education? Right? And so there are ways in which, and I'm drawing here from Ched Myers and all the work of watershed discipleship that recognizes that all of the earth has these watersheds in which we can track a certain type of bioregion so you know what's happening within that space. And each watershed is quite different. And so Jesus was born in a particular watershed, and he discipled himself to that watershed and really got to know and love that space. And so we as disciples also are born in particular watersheds. And so we can know and love those spaces as an act of following our incarnation, right? And so as we profess Jesus as an incarnation of God, how might also we see the whole body of the earth as an incarnation of God? So, and experience that as God's goodness and see ourselves as part of that incarnation, right? So that can be called ecological theology, and that comes from a more non-anthropocentric approach. But even if folks are like, no, humans are different and set apart and need to act in a particular way, the destruction level that we're seeing and seeing Earth as just a supply house and a sewer is tragic and devastating.
Yeah.
And even something as mundane as the design of the freshwater flush toilet, which is where my expertise is, relates to that, right? There's a limited amount of fresh water on the planet. We need it for drinking. We need it for washing. We need it for blessing one another, but we don't need it for pooping and peeing in. There are other ways that we could handle our excreta that recognize the gift that it could be. Pee is full of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Those are pretty important fertilizers, and pee is basically sterile. One round of pasteurization, you can apply that for agriculture, right? And you can cut down on fossil fuel-based fertilizers that have to be imported in that fuel war. Or on the other hand, like poop, that's like a health smoothie for a tree. It's a carbon sink, and it stops erosion, sticky, and all those sorts of things. But we can figure out soil pathways and composting if we were willing to be like, this creation is called good. Even what's coming out of my body, I might think it's weird, gross, or stinky. I mean, It is, but it too, even our extra that we don't need can be a part of glorifying God and the cycles in which our nutrients need to pass, right? And so it requires like spiritual disciplines and a lot of humility. So I think more Christians aren't conservationists because it takes slowing down, being humble, dealing with your crap, literally and metaphorically, and not pretending that there's somewhere else that is away. So if the eschatology, which is like this understanding of the end times or what's coming, if your eschatology is that earth is passing away and is not the important place, then it can result in theologies like this. And those theologies began to creep in already in 313 Common Era, when Christianity was taken over by empire and said, it doesn't matter what's necessarily happening in one bioregion, this can go everywhere. And this is with this, I can conquer with this. And when Christianity moved from being a grassroots, egalitarian, deeply welcoming, deeply located movement towards one that began to conquer and trample other ways of knowing, that was when we lost some of our conservation tendencies.
Yeah.
But if we don't destroy the planet now, as James Crable would say, we could still be in the early church. So I still have hope that as we face these really intense times with climate catastrophe, it'll be a major wake-up call and help return us to this heavenly womb that we are designed to roam as humans and with all the creatures.
And I think one of the first things you said was talking about the early disciples, the early church, and the way that they were walking from place to place. And it just seems like they had such a deeper connection with the earth as it existed. And I wonder what that would look like now if the church as it existed was really intentional about that. Because I think that's a part of spirituality and worship that's kind of lost now. Yeah.
In some places, but not everywhere.
That's
so perhaps
true.
That's the other thing
in
we can do is to
Western
learn.
American mindset. Yeah.
We can learn from those who are still connecting with the earth and finding how their Christianity helps rewild their faith. And then that relates, of course, to their politics. And that's going to mean standing up and participating in defense of earth as deforestation continues. It will mean taking huge risks like Christ took to protect so-called the least of these, right? But 1 Corinthians 12 says, the parts of the body all matter. And, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. The foot cannot say, because I'm not a nose, I'm not a part of the body. Yet all the parts of the body work together. And so, similarly, trees exhale and we are able to inhale oxygen. And we exhale carbon dioxide. And trees are able to metabolize that. And so we cannot say to the trees, I have no need of you, right? They're an extended part of this body, as are the fungi, as are every species in the ecosystem. So one thing I think that we could do on the road to being conservationists is similar, like how the church is present for funerals for people. We ought to be maybe present also for funerals for species that are going extinct, to lift them up, to say their names, to eulogize and to speak our loss that we're experiencing. And we can also do that for already those species that are endangered. We don't have to wait till they're extinct, but to help people know and be in relationship with this sibling of our, shared global atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this has kind of inspired some people who are listening to say, okay, you know what, you're right. I, as a Christian, should be caring about the environment more. What do you feel like is a good entry point to doing this kind of work and learning and participating in environmental justice in some way?
Thank you. Yes, it's always great to share entry points. I mean, of course, if this is going to Anabaptist audience, I really want to shout out the Anabaptist Climate Collaborative, which is working very specifically with the architecture of our faith and the ways in which many of us have been land workers in our past, and farmers, others, and have relationships to the land. You don't have to be a farmer to have relationships with land, but we have a sensibility to that has influenced how we are in our faith work. And so drawing on those relationships is important. I think Christian, vegan, and vegetarian networks are very important in this regard, as it transforms our relationship with animals that sometimes are designated to be eaten or their bodies consumed in other ways. This is a way to talk about, different relationships with this question of sacrifice and with different bodies and breaking chains of the using of our bodies. AMBS, Intercultural Competency and Undoing Racism coordinator, Nikisha, Elena, Alexis works on this, as well as a number of others in these questions of how we relate. Another thing would be dismantling the doctrine of discovery and domination. These relationships that we have with the environment are also really deeply damaged when the relationships of people, particularly indigenous peoples that were in specific places, were like genocide was attempted against them or was completed against them, or where their disruption with place, that severing. The Dismantling Doctrine of Discovery Coalition is working on helping to create repair in a lot of those places, because as people connect to place, there's a wholeness there that can come, and that is a way of doing environmental justice. There's also incredible Black-led environmental justice groups working both rural but often in urban spaces that are saying, we're not devoid of nature here. Like there's a lot here, and we also want access to the regenerative aspects of the earth, and to not be enclosed away from them and through infrastructural violence, through the ways that the urban environment has been designed and segregation has happened. And so, there are groups, Listening and Learning Tours, Mennonite Mission Network goes on some of those. Right here in Elkhart County, I've been helping to birth a climate justice initiative called EFFORT, which means Eco-Friendly Elkhart, Realizing Transition. And we also work as EFFORT by another acronym, or the same acronym, EFFORT, but Eco-Friendly Everywhere, Realizing Transition, because Elkhart County can't do it all. So this is an org that is working on the mycelial level, which means like the type of fungal messengers that carry information between trees underground and help cultivate soil. And so that's like a group that's been helping to catalyze and support transformations that are occurring here as we realize the transition of what type of community will need to be. There's also the Rooted and Grounded conference at AMBS, and I might be missing some entry points, but I would just say, first of all, folks, like take your shoes off and go walk around outside and get grounded and be glad to be alive. That is your first entry point. That's my mentor, Joanna Macy. She would always say, I'll tell you how to help the environment. Be glad to be alive. So reorient from negativity, from discontentment, to come into deep gratitude and honor the pain that you have, the pain for the world, what the world's going through. And through that, you'll start to experience life, not just as your individual self, but as a collective and communion of all that is. So those are some of the ways I think people could start. And there's wild churches popping up, and just to take some time each day to avert your eyes from the screen. So maybe right after this, just like go outside or, spend some time at the window and breathe and feel the ways, all the ways in which the environment inside of yourself, from your gut all the way to your skin, is a part of it all, and experiencing it and realizing then that conservation will mean conserving yourself.
I know, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, go touch grass.
Yeah.
That's something people say on the internet a lot. And I know it's kind of usually meant as an insult about like, go, like, oh, you're so online, go touch some grass, go, basically saying to get offline. But I think I don't know exactly where that comes from originally, but I mean, there's value to that. I think there's like the connection with the planet and the connection with being outside and recognizing, like you've said, is being in nature in that way and reconnecting with the ground, reconnecting with the earth. It really is a centering and gratitude practice that doesn't just have to be a joke. Yeah. Yeah. Are you ready for the next post we're going to react to?
All right.
So this next one also comes from the subreddit Christianity, and the post title is "Being a Human is Weird." I hate being human. I like humans most of the time anyway. We can create such beautiful things and entertain ourselves, but I wonder why God had to create us so disgusting. We stink, have to wash constantly, fart and poop all day, and can't think about anything but food and clothes, sex, etc. I often wonder what God and the angels think when they see all this. I wonder what Jesus thought about being godly, trapped in a human body and subjected to all this. I just don't enjoy being human, and I honestly can't wait to receive a new glorified body from God.
Wow, that is a really particular type of eschatology around the glorified body. During the Explore program here, Rihanna Isaac Krause asked the youth, so do you think there will be pooping in heaven?
That's actually one of the questions I've seen also on Reddit.
Yeah, and there was this question kind of early on that was actually debated as a serious theological issue around whether or not Jesus pooped. Right? Because if Jesus was fully human, then of course Jesus would pass through leftover nutrients from their body and experience all of that. Now, that is a more Hebraic understanding. From Greek understandings of the body, if all nutrients were absorbed and used, then there wouldn't be excreta necessarily. And if Jesus had a perfect body, then there wouldn't be excreta. So it's kind of like debates about like what does the body do, or how is the body structured, or what do we understand? Eventually the consensus were like, yeah, he pooped. And the other people were like, yeah, remember he spent all that time alone, away from the crowd?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, sure, yeah, maybe he was in devotion, but he was also just like taking a crap. Or both and, right? Like, holy crap. Like, there is a way in which our releasing is part of what makes us whole. And, right now, like, in the face of humans facing, like, some replacement by technological machinery, be it AI and others, like we're being told it's like partially because we're weird, gross, inefficient, et cetera, et cetera. However, what if that's what makes us special? And by special, I mean like a real part of it all that we can also dissolve. So ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That word for dust there is ophor. And I worked with Ben Olenberger to look at ophor. He was a prof here as well. And he said, hey, like ophor, like that can really be translated like fertile topsoil, right? So the fact that we're like from this Adamah, which of course means earth and Adam and everything, and ophor gives us this idea of being able to dissolve well back into things. And if we were cut from steel and didn't return our hot air through farts and didn't release the leftover, dead blood, microbiota, bacteria, that make up all this earth, like we would be cutting ourselves off from creation. So I can't say, of course, in a way, what God and angels think. But they might be excited. It might not be that's what makes us different from humans. There may be a way in which there's an invitation for us to inhabit these, you could call them limitations, but also helps keep us grounded and knowing and remembering that these are, that like, we are being fed to feed one another in our life and for our body to then go back and feed the earth at passing. So yeah, I have a lot of contestations with funerary rituals that are trying to emulsify. I think embalm is what I'm going for here. That are trying to embalm the body and preserve something in a very particular understanding of what resurrection of the body means. What if resurrection of the body means that you become good food for others? And these other beings, of course, are worms, bacteria, fungi, and everything that helps us become a part of all that is, and to really melt into the broader body of God, which, in many ways is this planet, I would say. Because the stories of how we create gods and angels and others in our mind are the stories that emerge from this earth. that emerged from the species and us coming together and saying, why are we here? How are we here? How did we get opposable thumbs? Who do we have to thank for that? Well, there are long lines of species that we're connected to, that we're experimenting and figuring out how to do that, right? And this beauty of the unique species that we are is how I prefer to look at it rather than weird and gross. But yeah, disgust also is an evolutionary principle that helps us to not eat our poop and to not eat things that could make us sick. But it doesn't mean that it's not a necessary part of the cycle, that decay and breaking down are just as holy as the building up and the growth. And I would love to see our faiths grow in that regard, to increase green burial opportunities and to advocate for ways in which we hospice each other and, frankly, hospice modernity, as Vanessa Machado de Oliveira would say, so that we can really, truly be one with everything which is divine and holy. Yeah. So that's what I would say to that. You're like, do robots menstruate? Do robots leak? No, I mean, like, no. Our leaky bodies are where it's at because it reminds us that we're porous and cannot fool us into thinking that we can actually do this thing ourselves.
Right.
Rather, it's a constant reminder that we need each other. And the smell part helps because we used to use our sense of smell a lot more to know, okay, who's my neighbor? Who's that person moving around in the dark? Like, that's something that we could actually sharpen, and that could help us out rather than deodorize and sanitize and try to stay all completely in small boxes and just plug up and shut up. No, we're made to be porous bodies. Now, I'm not saying boundaries are important, right? It's incredible. There's a prayer that's often said by Orthodox Jewish folks upon leaving the bathroom that is glorifying God for all the hollows and openings and boundaries and tubes, because if the tubes that are, when you try to go to the bathroom, if the tubes that are closed are open, or the tubes that are open are closed, then you can't excrete well, right? And so that's one of the blessings, the morning blessings that's there, and it just recognizes that when everything is working together, it's a true miracle, and our orifices are a part of that.
Yeah. What I hear you saying here is it's kind of complicating this, I think, dualism of like clean and dirty, perfect and imperfect. And I mean, it's like you're completely throwing it out. And I think there's so much power in that I think people don't really recognize a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, just question the categories that we have been given and the infrastructure that enforces that we've been given, right? So with this freshwater flush toilet, what is, part of your individual body then goes in parts to be of the collective, and it goes where, right? Like it flushes away, but there's no such place as away. Away is somewhere. There are beings and of all types, fish, algae, people who live downstream. And so what might feel clean with a porcelain pedestal toilet bowl full of water might feel clean to you is creating dirty elsewhere. And so the invitation to change our inherited infrastructure towards something that will require us to turn around, see our excreta, examine it because it's got good medical information, and then take a cup of that topsoil or bagasse, which is sugarcane casting off, or wood chips, whatever is available in bulk, and you can put a little bit on top and to cover it, and it can take a soil pathway, and the microbes will do their own work and break it down. We can feed the dung beetles, we can feed the worms, we can feed the bacteria, and not only that, but we can preserve fresh water to be able to stay clean in that sense of the word. And so people might say, oh, I don't want to do that, that's dirty, but the result is a cleaner downstream. So yeah, I do like to play with those dualities and figure out what happens if we're willing to look at the picture a little bit larger and not only see our individual interaction. So I do think in the future we will not be pooping and peeing in fresh water, and churches I've heard around the world are on the front lines of this in many ways because bathroom facilities are precious, and there are 3.5 billion people who don't have a place to excrete in dignity. And so it's not possible that the freshwater flush toilet will be the solution there because there isn't enough water. So we want to create an awesome system, not a pit latrine system, but one that actually composts and helps us create soil. And just like ashes to ashes overall, that's our daily dust. Our daily ashes is our excreta. And so how might we find ways to glorify God through taking the time to pay attention to what we've excreted and making sure that it is well contained and safe and able to pass back into nutrient cycling in a way that doesn't create any harm. That's the freshest thing to do, but it does mean we will be a little closer to our stench. But I think we're strong enough to do that. And when people have to, they do. It often happens during disasters or times of panic. But people realize, okay, there are other ways that I could do this simple action that I've never thought about before, because you just jiggle the handle and it goes somewhere. To say, okay, this is also part of my responsibility. Oh, maybe I'll create some devotional materials on this someday. Call it holy shit. We have to beep that out too. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
It is holy.
But yeah, I mean, I think like we're called to glorify God in everything we do.
Everything we do.
Yeah, so it's not just this like, oh, maybe we're called by God to be thinking about how we excrete and what we do with it. No, if we're called to glorify God in everything we're doing, that's included. That's a part of everything. Yep. Yeah.
Sacred processes all around.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that question and excretory justice?
Well, yeah. Oh, actually, mentioning excretory justice is, a term that came through my work in kind of figuring out a framework of justice, because there is a massive sanitation crisis. And not only that, but we need a framework of justice that cares not only for the humans involved in making sure that we can get excreta infrastructure technology that is supportive, but also what happens to the matter that we excrete. So it's a framework of justice that is thinking both about the poopers and their poop, about those who pee and the urine, right? Menstruators and menstrual blood, so that justice can occur within a watershed and environmental space. And so excretory justice, I invite people to lift it up alongside other justices they work on. For example, food justice. I call excretory justice the back end of it, right? Because a lot of fantastic work is going into who is laboring to bring us the food, what delivery systems, what food it is, how local it is or not. But that all is to the point of where it touches the mouth and we begin to digest. But this process afterwards is just as important because it is a cycle. You don't want it to be broken. But also racial justice, thinking about who lives in downstream communities and downhill communities. And we know shit rolls downhill, right? So literally and metaphorically, what are communities that are being designated as disposable because we think about poop as disposable? And so challenging a flush and forget mentality altogether can be a way that excretory justice and racial justice go together. Of course, with the issues of climate as well. You know, there's a lot of poop with 8 billion people on the planet, coming to 9 billion not too long from now. We are excreting a lot, and poop can be used for fuel. It can be used to feed Hermetia lucens larvae that then can become chicken feed. There's all sorts of ways that we'll need to experiment with this for circular economies and climate too. So I'm hoping that it can serve in that regard. And, hey, some people say it's a dirty job, but some people have to do it, and I'm willing. I just call it a revolution from the bottom up.
That's awesome. All right, are you ready for our last question here?
I am. This is so fun. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. So this last question is coming from the subreddit Christian, and the title of the post is Wicked Actually Demonic? Oh. The post says, so I recently saw Wicked in theaters and I loved it, and I had a lot of positive messages. It had a lot of positive messages and music. But apparently some Christians are saying that the film is demonic and they walked out and are avoiding seeing it. What are your thoughts? Is it demonic, and is Wicked really a bad movie? And I mean, my answer right away is no. And my answer is, like, there actually are a lot of important Christian themes that I would see present in Wicked. And I mean, earlier today, I know you'd seen my bag, which has a lot of Wicked pins on it because I'm obsessed. My lock screen of my phone has been Wicked for a year now. So when you mentioned that you were interested, I was so excited. And so, of course, we needed an opportunity to talk about this.
Absolutely.
So I mean, do you feel the same? What do you see in
Wow, I'm
Wicked?
I'm so heartbroken that the demonic label is one being thrown around, like, that really needs to be reserved for those who understand the impacts of spiritual struggle and pressures at the levels of power and principalities. So I would call skyrocketing wealth inequality and having a half trillionaire on the planet while others have almost nothing, I would reserve the term demonic for that. Because it creates such a vast pull that we have systems that incentivize dehumanization, right? That's where, for me, the demonic comes in. So this is such an incredible production. I saw it first on Broadway, and at that time, I'd taken a leap of faith to be a student government president at Spelman College, and I was in the thick of working with the ways in which perception of who we were as Black women, standing up against patriarchy in some hip hop songs, and also working hard about how we would self-govern. Anyway, all of that is to say, there was a massive lack of trust, and stories were spinning every which way around me about who I was or why I was asking questions and challenging our governance board. But my sense was that was what was important to do, and that's what we were called to do as students, was to try to create accountability, which is what Alphaba tries to do. She tries to create accountability with the wizard, and there's a resistance to that. And so here, I thought I was doing everything that I could and should, and it was like no good deed went unpunished, which is one of these songs that were sung. And it touched me to the core to understand that perception is as powerful as what actually happens. That facts aren't everything, but the stories that spin around them are, or have a great impact, as well as, wow. So it helped me see so much. When I at one point was being maligned, and all I was trying to do was create these connections and webs of friendship using the power that I had. So I've been resonating with it since 2005. And now to see it come out on the big screen, and the level of artistry and the commitments, and of course the undercurrents of deep friendship and love between the two main characters, as well as this question of how they're negotiating family, lineage, pressure upon them. I think so many can relate, as well as, the challenge of the media and stories, and how we talk about one another rather than talking to one another. I mean, that's a major theme. I think there's so much there. Tell me more about your thoughts.
Well, okay, full transparency. Last year when the movie came out, I was in a Christian ethics class and wrote my final paper about Wicked.
I have to read it.
So I literally have hours and hours and hours of what I would want to say about Wicked. But I will say something that struck me during the second movie that came out this past month was a new song that was included called The Girl in the Bubble, which is the song that Ariana Grande sings as Glinda. And I feel like so much of the theme of what I've really taken away from Wicked and what I love about it is represented in that song. Specifically in the song, she is singing about how this is the time that she needs to stop living in this perfection and being obsessed with people's perception of her, and it's this time to really break out of what she's always expected to do and realize that she needs to actually be good, because there's a lot of that theme in the movie is this of the duality of evil and good, specifically wicked and good. And so she kind of has this she comes to and realizes, okay, if I'm going to be called good, I have to actually figure out what does that mean. And so she sings the song, and I really find it so powerful because I feel like there is a temptation as people of faith to kind of stay within our own bubbles that are very safe and just want to be comfortable all the time. And we can talk about what it means to be disciples of Christ, to be sharing the gospel in whatever form that takes, to be standing up against systems of oppression. And I think in that realm of being stuck, this song kind of speaks to that feeling of like, okay, I can't just be comfortable. Mm-hmm. I have to recognize what's happening and pop the bubble and really figure out if I'm actually holding these beliefs, I have to actually show that. And I mean, that was from the second movie, so that didn't make it into my paper a year ago, but that's just something that I think about with this movie is figuring out like, how are we as Christians called to be living in spaces with authoritarianism?
Yes.
Where in spaces where there are oppressors at play, and what are we supposed to do? And I mean, one of the authors we read in that class in the Christian ethics class was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and the context that he was living in and the way that he was standing up to authoritarian power. And I mean, it felt very relevant when Wicked came out, saying, "Yep, this is an environment that he was speaking to, and arguably an environment that we're speaking to now." And I think, I mean, we can say that like standing up to an authoritarian power is just something that we should do as good people, but I think it is truly a Christian expectation too. So,
Yeah,
and that's just so well shown in Wicked.
And this movie had so much to do with courage and building our courage. And both you and I were at the Mennonite Action training around to build our courage and to and that bubble popping was like finally courageous. But like, look how it looked. Oh, it was already in the second movie. Like Glinda had many opportunities. Like Elbow was saying, "Come on, let's build this courage, Firo. Let's build this courage." And it's just watching Firo's shift in real time is really important. Like he had that core, and when presented with the challenge, met it, really met it, and again that emboldened others then later, right? But we're not unchanged when we meet that courage, or when our heart is locked in, or when we're so much in our own story that we can't see how to reach to others. So I think the courageousness as well as the clarity about authoritarianism and the impact on humans and the environment and animals all is right there. It's so potent.
Yes, absolutely. I think we could probably have an entire other episode talking about Wicked, but I think we'll have to end it there. But thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for answering some of these questions and responding to these stories. There's a lot of really great insight that you've given here.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun. Really huge kudos to you all who are working on this. And this is really meaningful, and I can't wait to continue sharing more of this series with others.
Yeah. So after we've talked about all of this, what is your impression of Reddit now?
Oh, wow. Actually, what I have loved about this is that, Reddit often, it's a faceless place. And by even lifting the stories like kind of through you as a faithful human, to me, it's enabled me to interact with it in a more beautiful way. So I think, just that practice of humanizing, of sharing stories, often there is a lot of isolation that can happen, and we're isolated through our screens talking to one another. But if we can share with one another, even if it's our burdens, even if it's our griefs, our sense of disconnection, what happens through sharing is really powerful. So I feel grateful for this opportunity to share, to hear more about it through you.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. Yeah. And thank you for listening to Seminary Reacts. Please leave us a like, a positive review, and comment any questions or stories for us to react to. You can find Seminary Reacts on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. See you next time. Bye!